correspondent.
This is Akashvani. In the program Money Talk, now we bring you a discussion on proposals for agriculture sector in Union Budget 2024-25. The participants are Sushma Ramachandran, Economic Analyst, and Lalima Aneja Dang, Anchor.
In the Union Budget 2024-25, Finance Minister Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman has given special emphasis to agriculture. 1.52 lakh crore rupees have been earmarked for agriculture and the allied sector in this budget, which is an increase of 8.1% over the last one. To discuss this and more, we have with us Ms. Sushma Ramachandran, our economic expert. Welcome, Sushma, to Akashvani Studios.
Thank you, Lalima.
Sushma, I just talked about the fact that this budget saw an increase of 8.1% in the agriculture and allied sector over the last one. Does that reflect the seriousness of the government to improve the lives of farmers? Because that is a priority in the government's list.
I think you can judge that from the fact that the finance minister started her speech when she was talking about the various highlights and the issues that they're going to be covering in the budget. She started with agriculture, and there is now a recognition that we need to bring about an increase in farmers' incomes, given the fact that, agriculture, of course, as a percentage of GDP, it has now fallen, but there are so many people who are dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. As many as 45% of our working force is in the agricultural sector. So one of the things that, has been talked about and also in the economic survey and indications have been given in the budget is that we need to bring people out of agriculture, perhaps remain in rural areas, but provide them avenues of employment. And the budget is also moving in that particular direction.
Drone Didi is something which the Prime Minister has often mentioned in his speeches. Are drones to be provided to 15,000 selected women self-help groups for offering rental services to farmers. Now, actually, this was started in March 2024, but this time, 500 crore rupees have been earmarked for this. Now, this is a step, I think, in the direction of women-led development, very close to the Prime Minister's heart, rather than just empowering women.
I think this is not just in the direction of women-led development, it's also a direction in bringing agriculture into the digital space. There is also now talking about digital public infrastructure in the agriculture sector. So this has brought technology in. You have women who are not just going to be doing the very mundane kind of things that we do talk about. Of course, they're important. You have women in cooperatives, you have women entrepreneurs even at the agricultural level, and women laborers. So you have women working in many areas of the agricultural economy. But here you bring in technology. And you are giving the woman, empowering her, as you rightly pointed out, with this particular technological advancement, because drones is not a small thing.
Yes.
Drones is a very highly advanced piece of equipment.
Yes.
And that can be used for surveying fields, for mapping areas, for providing information, spraying pesticides. Drones have multiple uses, but definitely it brings not only women, as you say, women-led development, but women-led development into the area of high technology. And that's something that, we have been looking forward to, that women should not be left behind in this progress towards science and technology. We are, of course, a great software power, but women in rural areas have not really been catching up with this kind of digital advancement.
Moving on, the budget also talks about 1 crore farmers to adopt natural farming practices, supported by, now this is important, it says supported by certification and branding. Now, unknowingly, many farmers in India, as a traditional system of farming, have been practicing organic farming. This way, you will improve soil, you will reduce your fertilizer bill, you will also increase export opportunity for the farmer, because if your product is naturally produced without chemicals, we increase the export opportunity. And of course, the consumer gets a chemical-free produce. What do you say about that?
Absolutely. This is a trend now, just not in India, but worldwide. There's a feeling that we have been using too much of chemical fertilizers, too much of pesticides, and we must go back to natural farming. The problem, of course, has been that we have needed chemicals in terms of fertilizers and pesticides because we have needed volumes in terms of food grains. I mean, for this country to feed its population in the 1960s, we had what was known as the Green Revolution.
Right.
And we had at that time adopted high-yielding varieties. And those high-yielding varieties needed large amounts of fertilizers and pesticides. Now, that was a policy which was required at that point of time.
Yes.
Now the situation is different. We are a country that is not only self-sufficient, we are capable of exporting, whether it is wheat, rice, many other agricultural products. So we don't need to get into volumes. We have sufficient inventories and stocks of grain. So we now need to gradually de-link ourselves from this dependence on chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Of course, it's not something that can be done at once. We have to accept the fact that chemical fertilizers will be used by farmers because they have been used to it, and it is, as I said, linked to the kind of varieties that they have been using, both in terms of rice and wheat. But it can be a gradual process. And now the farmers, it's a different generation. These are farmers who will have to be trained in natural farming, who didn't grow up learning organic farming naturally as their parents or grandparents did. So this is something they have to be taught. And one of the benefits of organic farming, benefits or negatives, you can say both ways, is that you get much higher returns for the produce that you get. And at one time, that was a problem because you were not having enough market for organic products. That situation has again changed because you have such a large market for organic markets, not just in India, but abroad.
Right. If the volumes increase, the prices will come down.
Yes.
And it's beneficial for the consumer and the farmer.
Absolutely.
Right. The demand is there. You just mentioned Green Revolution. Well, ironically, Green Revolution focused on rice and wheat, and I dare say that rice is a water-consuming monster grain. Now we are moving towards pulses, oilseeds, and vegetables. That is the idea now, which is good because we are importing edible oil and pulses as well. So the idea is to become Atmanirbhar in pulses and oilseeds, Sushma?
I think there are many benefits of focusing on pulses, oilseeds, and vegetables. Number one, you talked about rice being a water guzzling crop. The difference here is that pulses and oil seeds can be grown in what we call rain-fed areas, that you don't need irrigation, and they can be grown in these kind of drier areas. You don't have to have heavy irrigation. You don't have to do that waterlogging of the soil that has created problems in some of our states, especially northern states of Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP. So pulses and oilseeds can be grown with lesser infrastructure, vegetables also, and also, as we talked about the fact that we are right now importing pulses, we are importing oilseeds. We need oilseeds for producing oil, extraction of oils, and therefore we will be reducing our foreign exchange outgo as well. So it is not only beneficial for the soil, it should be also more remunerative for the farmer and remunerative for the country in terms of reducing our foreign exchange outgo. And of course, vegetables is another area where farmers can very profitably shift from wheat and rice, where they're dependent on a minimum support price. They're looking forward to it. But if they go in for vegetables or fruits, this has been documented by agricultural researchers, and they say that people who have shifted to vegetables or fruits are getting much, much higher returns. And they didn't realize that they should have shifted earlier.
Let's talk about the National Cooperation Policy and rural economy. The idea is to fast-track growth of rural economy and generate employment. At the end of the day, it all boils down to creating employment opportunities on large scale. Is that the goal and relevant?
I think farmers' cooperatives are the basis for so many of agricultural commodities. If you look at the dairy sector, the milk, what we called Operation Flood, the milk revolution in this country was started by cooperatives, milk cooperatives in Gujarat, and subsequently it spread all over the country. You also have cooperatives in the area of other crops. Then you also have apex cooperative unions. You have the National Cooperative Union. You also have cooperatives in the area of fertilizers. You have the Krishik Bharati Cooperative Union. So cooperatives where farmers are brought together and they bring their marketing and the inputs that they require for their food grains production or vegetable production, fruit production is helped by the cooperative system. And this has been a sort of a time-tested system in this country. And I think that strengthening it will only strengthen farmers who are increasingly having small holdings. This is another big problem. We'll strengthen farmers and strengthen the agricultural productivity in the country.
It seems that the government is widening the scope of agriculture. I mean, it's not just limited to just rice and wheat, as I just mentioned. When we talk of growing oil seeds and pulses, pulses are nitrogen fixing, so it's good for the soil. So monocropping is something that we are avoiding, and we are trying to expand into vegetables, oilseeds and pulses. Similarly, we are now moving beyond the scope of just agriculture, and we are moving to allied sectors like there is aquaculture,
Yes.
there is beekeeping and so on, which can also supplement a farmer's income very nicely. We are one of world's largest shrimp exporters. Now we are trying to fine tune this also in the budget. What do you say to that?
I think this is an area that certainly needs focus and support. I mean, even though the marine sector is doing so well in terms of exports, it needs support in terms of testing centers, because these prawns, shrimps, or seafood is exported to countries which have what we might call non-tariff barriers. They are very particular about the kind of, they do a certain kind of testing. We need to have testing labs available for
Yes.
for people who are fishermen who are involved in aquaculture. And we also need, and this has been brought out in the budget, you also need a better quality of breed stock. And that has been, they mentioned in the budget. They have talked about setting up nuclear centers for shrimp broodstock. So the quality of the seafood would improve. I think the target of exporting marine products has been raised to 1 lakh crore in the budget. This is the target we have. But what is also required is to improve productivity. And there are also proposals, I think that is also been included in the budget, to have integrated aqua parks where you can have ponds and you can breed fish and other seafood, and then farm them for export or even use within the country. So this is a really, really huge area, and I just talked about the target that's really large. So this is an area, it's already doing very well, but it can do much better.
Let's talk about agricultural research. The government wants to have a comprehensive review of agricultural research framework to enhance productivity, especially climate resilient crop varieties. The plan, of course, includes release of 109 high yielding climate resilient varieties. Now, I was keen to know that, of course, this seems like combating the climate change which is happening. You see the climate patterns are changing. If it rains heavily. If it's a drought, it's a severe drought. Is the government planning to dig into lab for these high-yielding varieties, or dig into the farmers' reserves of the traditional desi seeds, as one would call them, because we do have a huge bank of climate-resilient seeds, So, or is it a bit of both?
Yes,
which way are we going?
We do have a very large indigenous seed bank. But I think what the government is talking about in terms of research and development, I think what has been happening in the past, and we have had, we're one of the few countries which has had a very large network of research institutes in the agricultural sector. And each research institute has been devoted to a particular crop. You've got a research institute for pulses, you have a research institute for oil seeds, you have research institutes for wheat and rice and all sorts of things. But now we need to have research in a different way. And these are the areas we need to look at climate resistant varieties because of the change in climatic conditions in this country as a result of global warming. We need to look at all these factors, and research needs to be focused in a different way. So the approach and the strategies of the research institutes needs to change to look at everything now from a new modern perspective. And that's what I think they are looking at.
We do know that ICAR has signed many MOUs with companies from abroad in this sector, and the government is also focusing on bridging the gap which happens from the food coming from land to lab. So on that note, Sushma, thank you so much for coming to Akashvani studio and enlightening us with your views and reviews on agricultural reforms and agricultural practices or planning in the budget session.
Thank you,
very
Lalima.
much.
You were listening to a discussion on proposals for agriculture sector in Union Budget 2024-25. The participants were Sushma Ramachandran, Economic Analyst, and Lalima Aneja Dang, Anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsttalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.